Have you ever stopped and thought, wait a second, we've got lions in India, right? So why don't we have tigers in Africa? I mean, Africa's the land of big cats. Lions, leopards, cheetahs, practically a predator paradise. But somehow no tigers ever made it there. Not now, not in the past. Nothing. It feels weird, right? Because when you zoom out and look at the map, it almost feels like a glitch in the animal matrix. Tigers are all over Asia, from Siberia to the jungles of Sumatra. Lions dominate the African savanna. But for some reason, these two heavyweight cats never shared the same playground, except for that one tiny pocket in India, where they kinda brush shoulders today. Today, there's only one place on Earth where lions still roam outside of Africa. A little patch of dry forest in western India called the Gir Forest. That's it. Just one population hanging on in a small corner of Gujarat, surrounded by people, farmland, and traffic. It almost feels like they're in the wrong place. In a way, they kind of are. But here's the twist. They didn't arrive in India recently. Asiatic lions are actually a leftover from a time when lions had a way bigger range. We're talking tens of thousands of years ago, when lions weren't just in Africa. They were all over Europe, the Middle East, and deep into Asia. These weren't some weak jungle-only lions either. They were the real deal, part of the same species as African lions, just adapted to different climates and terrains. Some lived in forests, others in rocky deserts. They were incredibly flexible. But over time, most of those lion populations disappeared. Climate shifts, human expansion, and habitat loss took care of that. The ones in Europe went extinct. The ones in the Middle East vanished. And the lions in India, somehow, against all odds, they survived. What's wild is that these Asiatic lions aren't that different from their African cousins. They're just a bit smaller, with shorter manes, looser belly skin, and a slightly more social vibe. Same basic animal, just shaped by a different environment and a lot of isolation. So, why does this matter for tigers? Because if lions could spread that far, across continents, through deserts and forests, it means that they had tools to travel. Which brings us to the big question. If lions pulled it off, why didn't tigers? Tigers are the largest cats on the planet, and they've always been the top predators in their domain. But here's the thing. Their domain has always been Asia. From the cold forests of Siberia to the streaming jungles of Indonesia, tigers are kings of a completely different world from lions, and they like it that way. Tigers are mostly solitary. They need a lot of space, dense cover, and plenty of water. Unlike lions who thrive in open savannas and live in social groups, tigers are forest cats. They're ambush hunters, built for stalking through thick vegetation, not chasing prey across open plains. That preference for dense wooded habitats has a lot to do with where they ended up. You'll find tigers in India, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Southeast Asia, and the Russian Far East, all places with forests, rivers, or swamps. They never really moved into dry or open environments the way lions did. And it's not just about preference, it's about competition too. Lions had already locked down Africa and the Middle East. They had numbers, pride dynamics, and the kind of teamwork that can push other predators out. Tigers, being solo operators, weren't going to win that turf war, even if they tried. Plus, let's not forget how geography played a role. Tigers evolved in Asia, likely around China or Central Asia, and their path west was full of obstacles, deserts, mountains, other predators, and later, humans. So, could tigers have actually made it to Africa? On paper, maybe. There was a potential path, a land route through the Middle East. Back in the Ice Age, sea levels were lower, climates were shifting, and animals were on the move. Lions used that same corridor to get to India, and some even reached Europe and northern Asia. So why not tigers? Well, the road was open, but it wasn't exactly easy. First, the terrain. The route from South Asia into Africa goes through some pretty unforgiving places. Deserts, dry mountains, and open plains. Not exactly a tiger paradise. Remember, tigers aren't fans of wide open spaces. They need cover, water, and prey that they can sneak up on. Not flat land with nowhere to hide and herds of animals that can outrun them. Then there's the timing. By the time tigers started spreading into Asia, lions and other big predators had already claimed most of the good real estate in the West. Lions were dominating Africa and the Middle East. If a tiger wandered into that territory, it probably didn't end well. And with lions living in large, coordinated prides, they had a major advantage in holding on to territory. And finally, climate. The Sahara wasn't always a desert, but when it started drying up thousands of years ago, it became a massive barrier. Any big cat trying to cross it without backup, water, or shade? Not gonna happen. So even though it was technically possible for tigers to move west and reach Africa, the odds were stacked against them. Tigers stayed in the east where the forests were thick and the hunting was good, and that's why there were never African tigers, not even in the fossil record. But let's flip the question now. What if they had made it? Let's say one bold tiger population pushed west through the Middle East, found a forested pocket in East Africa, and actually settled in. What would have happened? First off, they'd have a rough time competing with lions. Lions don't mess around. They live in big prides. They team up and take down massive prey. And they're aggressive about territory. A lone tiger strolling into lion country would be outnumbered and outmatched. Even though a tiger is usually stronger one-on-one, it wouldn't matter against a gang of lions working together. That means tigers would need to find their own niche. They'd probably avoid the open savannas altogether and stick to more forested or mountainous regions, somewhere lions don't dominate. Think places like the Congo Basin or the Ethiopian highlands, where there's more cover and solitude. In those environments, tigers could do what they do best: sneak, ambush, disappear. They'd likely go after bush buck, forest buffalo, maybe even small antelope species. Their hunting style would still work. It just wouldn't be flashy like a pride of lions chasing down a zebra. But here's the real twist. If tigers had found the right habitat in Africa, they could have survived. And if they had enough time and isolation, they might have even evolved into their own unique subspecies. A forest-adapted African tiger, maybe smaller, maybe darker, perfectly tuned for life in the jungle. And just imagine how that would change the whole lion versus tiger debate. They wouldn't just be rivals on paper, they'd be neighbors, competing, adapting, maybe even driving each other to evolve. But that's all a giant what if. The truth is, Africa already had a full roster of predators. Lions, leopards, cheetahs, hyenas, wild dogs. Everyone had their role. There just wasn't room for opportunity for another apex cat to sneak in and stay. And that brings us back to the big picture. The real reason tigers never made it to Africa isn't because they couldn't fight or hunt. It's because evolution isn't just about strength. So yeah, it turns out the reason there are no African tigers isn't some massive mystery. It's just geography, timing, and lifestyle. Tigers evolved to be stealthy forest hunters. Lions became social savanna kings. One stayed in the dense jungles of Asia. The other marched across continents and took over the open plains. And even though there was a possible path between them, it just never lined up. The land wasn't right, the competition was fierce, and the moment passed. Meanwhile, a few lions clung to life in India, holding on as a tiny reminder that big cats once roamed far beyond the places we see them now. And honestly, that's one of the coolest things about wildlife history. It's full of near misses. Animals that almost made it somewhere. Predators that could have ruled a different land. Species that just missed their shot because the world shifted before they could. Now, here's the wildest part of all this. Even though tigers never made it to Africa naturally, some humans are trying to change that. Yep, there's actually a tiger population living in Africa right now. Not wild ones, but in a massive private reserve in South Africa, where conservationists are running an experimental project. It's called the Tiger Canyon Project. And the goal isn't to introduce tigers to Africa in a Jurassic Park way. It's to create a self-sustaining tiger population in a safe, controlled environment. They're not roaming the savannah with lions or anything like that. It's more about giving captive tigers a semi-wild space to hunt, breed, and live naturally, without the poaching and deforestation problems they face in parts of Asia. Some of the tigers are even adapting surprisingly well to the open terrain. But make no mistake, this isn't about turning Africa into tiger territory. It's more like a lifeboat, a backup plan, a way to keep the species alive and healthy while their original habitats are being figured out. Still, it's kind of poetic, isn't it? Tigers never got to Africa on their own, but now, with a little help, they're finally getting a taste of it. You've probably heard of African lions, but did you know North America had lions too? Not zoo escapees, not some weird fossil cousin. Real lions. Massive, powerful, continent-dominating predators that lived here for thousands of years. But here's the weird part. While lions made it across the Ice Age land bridges into North America, tigers never did. So how does one big cat make it into the New World, while the other, just as deadly, just as ancient, stays behind? Panthera atrox, the American lion, was an absolute monster. One of the largest cats to ever exist. Bigger than today's African lions. Bigger than most tigers. Some individuals may have weighed up to 400 kilograms. That's not just a lion on steroids. That's a predator that could go toe-to-toe with a bear. It showed up in North America around 340,000 years ago and quickly made itself at home. From Alaska to Mexico, it ruled the open landscapes of the Ice Age. Wide plains, dry shrublands, edges of forests. Anywhere large herbivores roamed, it followed. And North America had a buffet. Bison, prehistoric camels, horses, giant sloths, maybe even young mammoths if they caught them isolated. This wasn't a delicate ambush cat. It went after the big stuff. Its build was different from modern lions. Longer legs, more stretched out, probably faster over long distances. Not built for jungle stealth, but for chasing prey across open ground and bringing it down hard. Social behavior? Probably not like today's pride structure. There's no solid evidence of pack hunting. If anything, this was likely a more solitary cat, or maybe operated in small temporary groups. Deadly either way. And for a long time, nothing could challenge it. Not saber-toothed cats, not dire wolves, not even the infamous short-faced bear. The American lion was as top tier as it gets. But like most Ice Age megafauna, it didn't survive the end. Around 11,000 years ago, as the climate warmed and prey disappeared, so did the American lion. While the American lion was making itself at home in Ice Age North America, its striped cousin was taking a completely different path. To understand why, we have to go back to the beginning. Tigers most likely evolved in northern China or somewhere around the Tibetan Plateau roughly 2 to 3 million years ago. That's what the oldest fossils suggest. From there, they slowly expanded their range, first into eastern and southern China, then Southeast Asia, and eventually down into India, Sumatra, and Java. A northern population eventually gave rise to the Siberian tiger, which pushed into the cold coniferous forest of eastern Russia. But throughout all that expansion, tigers remained solidly Asian. They never crossed into the Middle East, never reached Europe, and despite existing for over 2 million years, they never crossed the Bering Land Bridge into North America, even though that bridge was opened several times during the Ice Age and allowed many other animals to make the trip. So, what happened? Why didn't one of the world's top predators ever step into the New World? First, tigers simply weren't in the right place at the right time. Most evidence points to tigers arriving in northeastern Asia very late, likely near the end of the last Ice Age. Fossil records and genetic studies suggest that they didn't inhabit far northeastern Siberia during the last glacial maximum around 20,000 years ago. And if they weren't in that region, they couldn't access the land bridge that connected Asia to Alaska. Some modeling studies even suggest that tigers only pushed into the Bering Strait region around 10,000 years ago, after the land bridge had already vanished beneath rising sea levels. Compare that to lions. Their ancestors, the Eurasian cave lions, were already well established across Europe and Siberia much earlier. They had time to reach the far north, while the land bridge was still exposed. That's how they crossed over and gave rise to the American lion. Tigers? They missed the window. Tigers are creatures of cover. They evolved for stealth, not for long-distance chases across open terrain. They thrive in dense forests, jungles, mangroves, and even swampy terrain. Even the Siberian tiger, which can handle freezing cold, still sticks to forests where it can hide and stalk prey. This preference for vegetation was a huge limiting factor during the Ice Age, because the Bering Land Bridge, also known as Beringia, wasn't covered in forest. It was cold, dry, and largely treeless, a mix of tundra, grassland, and permafrost. Good grazing land for mammoths and bison, but useless for a stealth hunter like the tiger. Meanwhile, lions had no problem with that kind of environment. Both cave lions and American lions were built for open terrain. They followed herds across the mammoth steppe and didn't need trees or dense cover to hunt effectively. Tigers were locked into the woodlands further south, too far to reach the bridge, and not well suited to what was on the other side anyway. Let's say, just for argument's sake, that a few tigers did manage to wander up to the edge of Beringia. Even then, the odds were still stacked against them. The land bridge wasn't a simple crossing. It was a vast stretch, up to 1,000 kilometers of cold, windy grassland with very little cover. It's not like crossing a forest path. For a jungle-adapted cat that relies on short bursts and close ambushes, traveling across a flat, exposed expanse with no hiding spots was a nightmare scenario. And migration doesn't happen overnight. You don't just drop a tiger on one side and expect it to build a population on the other. You need enough individuals to make the journey and survive long enough to find food, avoid predators, and reproduce. Without proper habitat and prey along the way, the whole thing breaks down. Let's say one more hypothetical. Somehow, a few tigers did make it across. What then? They would have walked straight into a battlefield of apex predators. North America during the Ice Age was no place for newcomers. The American lion was already dominating open habitats. Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat, was running ambush operations further south. Dire wolves hunting in large organized packs. And the short-faced bear, or Arctodocimus, was a hyper-carnivorous, kill-stealing tank of a predator that dwarfed everything else. On top of that, jaguars and cougars were already present in the southern forests, habitats that might have suited a tiger if it had made it that far. In ecology, it's hard to break into a new ecosystem when every niche is already filled. Even if tigers had arrived, they would have had to fight for space, food, and survival in an environment already packed with heavyweights. And this isn't a case where you just muscle your way in. Apex predators are incredibly territorial, and tigers, being solitary, would have had a hard time holding ground against more social or better established species. Now, to be clear, this factor probably didn't keep tigers out. They likely never got close enough to try. But if they had, it wouldn't have gone well. So when people ask, why were there lions in America but no tigers? The answer isn't that tigers were less capable. It's that everything had to line up perfectly. And for tigers, it just didn't. They evolved in Asia. They stayed in Asia. They were limited by terrain, timing, and habitat. By the time they were ready to push north, the land bridge was gone. And even if it hadn't been, the crossing was inhospitable and the destination was already occupied. Lions caught the window and carved their place in North America. Tigers missed it and stayed rulers of the East. So they never made it across during the Ice Age. But what if they had? Or what if, somehow, we introduced tigers into North America today? Could they survive? Strictly from a biological and ecological standpoint, yes, they could. Especially the Siberian tiger. Siberian tigers are already adapted to cold climates, deep snow, and northern forests. They survive brutal Russian winters and thrive in boreal ecosystems that look a lot like parts of Alaska and Canada. These tigers take down elk, wild boar, and even brown bears. They're absolute powerhouses. North America still has similar prey: moose, elk, deer, wild pigs in the south, and even bison in some areas. If dropped into a remote forest region with enough cover and game, a tiger could absolutely make a living. But that's just one side of the equation, because surviving doesn't just mean finding food. It also means avoiding people, and that's where things get complicated. Modern North America is not Ice Age North America. It's fragmented, loud, filled with cities, roads, farms, and people who don't want 300-kilo apex predators roaming through their backyard. The same isolation that kept tigers out before would now work against them in a different way. Habitat loss, conflict with humans, and lack of large protected wilderness areas would make it nearly impossible for a wild tiger population to take hold. Not to mention, we already have apex predators here. Grizzly bears in the west, black bears across most of the continent, cougars nearly everywhere, and wolves reclaiming territory in some regions. Unlike the Ice Age, though, today's North American predators tend to avoid conflict with people. Tigers don't always do that. There's also the ethical angle. Reintroducing tigers, even in some hypothetical conservation scenario, could easily disrupt the balance of existing ecosystems. They're solitary, territorial, and would likely clash with native carnivores. And even if you did release them in a remote area, they're smart and mobile. It wouldn't take much for one to show up near a town or livestock herd, and that's when people stop supporting the idea real fast. So, could tigers physically survive here? Yes. Thrive here long-term, naturally or peacefully, that's a different story. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with your friends. You can also leave a comment with what you would like to see in the following videos. Thanks for watching. See you next time.